Friday, Tim, and we're here. We're back. We're ready to go with another, shall we say, scintillating episode about what is it today? Team building and training and how those two merge?
Yeah, I thought it would be interesting. I started off thinking about team building, but then it turned into a little bit of a combination, didn't it?
Well, we've thought about, we've talked about training and the importance of training, probably as much on the non-technical, um, vocational side as we did in terms of even training in some of the areas of some of the soft skills. So I think the whole thing kind of merges together. And so maybe today's episode, we can kind of play with that idea.
That would be great. That would be great. So, how would you like to start us off?
Well, it occurred to me in terms of the importance of team. Let's start with the importance of team. I just realized as I was thinking about this, that one of the most profound experiences I've had, successful, this is a project manager's dream experience that I had. I'd been working in the state of Michigan on a large project, and we had over several years developed a very strong team with the system integrator, ourselves as project oversight, and the client themselves. We implemented that project successfully. It went in. It's still serving the people that it needs to serve. And interestingly enough, I was then awarded a contract to do very similar work in another state. And the other state wanted us to create an RFP, put together very much a project like we had just completed in the state of Michigan. So we did that. We put it out to bid. And the eventual winner was the same system integration team that we had worked with in Michigan. So long story short, one of our asks of the requests of the system integrator was how many of the team that they had brought to the state of Michigan could we count on coming to our new project? And they brought many, many, many of the leadership and the very highly skilled domain knowledge experts. And here's where I'm going with this long kind of windy story is the importance of team made the second project even more successful because we were so used to working together. We understood each other's weaknesses. We understood each other's strengths, and the success that we had on the second project was unbelievable in terms of that synergy that was experienced.
That's great. That's great. And you're right. You're right. The teams that actually focus on this concept of team, not just getting work done, but team, have a different character to them. They really do stick out. And I remember maybe three different teams that I've worked on in the last 25 years that I said were, the team, one of those teams. And I know exactly the experience you've had.
Yeah, that's true. That's an important thing. I've worked on many teams, probably close to 100 teams in my experience. But shall we say there are not that many D teams?
Uh-huh. Exactly.
And when you find it, hold on to it because that is the best feeling in the world as an IT person.
Yeah, it is. It's the collaboration. We'll get into that a little bit. I was thinking about that a little bit, but we'll have a little time to talk about that. But before we get there, let's start off with one of your statements that said training and team seem to go together. And there seems to be a little bit of an overlap. And you started off with that. And we sort of hinted at it when we talked about this show earlier. But what are the differences between training and team building?
Well, I'm going to come at this from a slightly different perspective. And maybe some of the people listening to us can relate to this as well, especially if you are sort of a gun for hire in terms of your consulting experience where you get brought into different projects in different jurisdictions. So when I think of building a team, I think of here are my requirements I need to fulfill. These are the tasks I and my project team need to work on. So let me first of all find the exact correct people to be able to work on those tasks. So when I build my team, I'm fitting people's experience to the task at hand. When I think of training, once we get going, then I think of bringing in training and start to work on areas in which they need further development. So I may have picked the absolute perfect analyst, systems and requirements definition gatherer, brought them into my team, and then find out that their writing skills are subpar. So I may then set up some training to develop that person's writing skills, as an example. So in many ways, team building in my mind, team building in this regard, and the training that comes are kind of opportunistic. That is, I fit people and skills to the needs of the project that I'm on. I don't know if that's your experience or if you have something different.
Let's think about this. Okay. So if you think about training as continuous improvement, change, we can actually think about the team as configuration management. Configuration management
Okay.
is what? It's the test and inspections and it's
Yeah.
version control, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
so it's funny because we don't separate the two. They're sort of go hand in hand. It's the configuration management that helps change management work so well. It's the change management that allows configuration management to do its job that it has to do. And so configuration management and change management work like two gears together in a project. Well, instead of calling it change management, talk about it from a human factor as training and improving and
Mm.
imparting of skills. And the team is the test and inspection and validation that the change is number one, what we need. And number two, the change work and it's giving us the good results that we need. So they do in a lot of ways go hand in hand.
That's an interesting concept. So if I take the example that I used, where I'm basically, because I was project oriented and I was not stuck to a single jurisdiction or a single organization. So my team building was largely based on who's available and who can meet the skill sets that I need. So if that's my change, then the training, the configuration, I guess that kind of makes sense. But how would I apply that to, let's say I'm part of an internal IT organization within a large corporation or an organization, and I've been there for 20 years and I have largely the same people to draw from. Does it still fit? Or does it even fit better maybe?
Well, think about you still have your training, which is your change.
Yep.
And it's the increase and the continuous improvement of the skills, knowledge, and attributes. The configuration management can still be improved too. You can change to a better tool.
That's
You can
true.
also improve the way you approach testing and inspections and version control and working hand in hand. It's the testing, inspection, version control that focuses all the change in the results of the project.
So that is interesting. And it just brought to mind a recent experience I had working with a team, again, consulting to a project, but working with a team where they were trying to bring their information technology staff into the kind of a new world of agile and web services and cloud-based architectures. They were bringing staff who had been mainframe COBOL staff.
Oh, I remember those days.
So you can imagine in your analogy, you can imagine the configuration management that has to go into that.
Yeah, and the technical configuration management where you have to change the whole infrastructure on how you're going to test and validate and convert and compare an old system to a new system. But you're also going to have to improve the skills, which is training, and improve how the team works together as a team.
Yeah.
Now, there are human factor components that are never going to change. We as individuals And as groups behave basically the way we have for over 100,000 years. But there are certain ways that we can focus on how we work together that actually can influence, tend us towards greater success in a project.
So in the example that I just gave, where we're bringing people from sort of the 1980s into the 2020s, the challenge isn't so much of the skill set in terms of their acumen, their IT sense. The idea now is I have to almost change attitudinal processes because in more of a hierarchical, more of a waterfall environment that they've come from, actually a lot of it being maintenance and operations also, they're not used to coming into a self-directed team approach. And so there's all of that. So, we talk about team building and training. In that case, the team is well built and they're very synergistic, but the training is huge.
Yeah, yeah. The art is making sure those two work together well. Think about it this way. Well, first of all, before we keep that. Okay,
Yeah.
let's put a thumbtack in the wall right there because we're going to
Okay.
come back to this. Okay. First of all, big question: do we grow a team or do we help a team grow? This is an important question.
So let me repeat that. Do we grow a team or do we help a team grow? Oh, that's an easy answer. Yes.
Yeah, but well, first of all, there's again, what's his name? Tuckman, Bruce Tuckman.
First, yeah.
Yeah, he created a really neat model that everybody remembers if they've ever gone through management or business school, right?
Yep.
The growth, the maturity rungs of how a group or a team or an organization grows, right? You form, you storm, you norm, perform, and adjourn. Okay. This happens to people whether they like it or not. We do it. It's built into our genetic material. It's something that we just do. Now, I believe, and my agreement with you is an agreement because I believe as managers and leaders, understanding this cycle and this model and understanding where to influence in a positive manner, we can help the team through the rough spots and celebrate and actually take advantage of the fun spots where the team hits. And this is the art to the science of working with a team.
Well, and think of it. So you asked, do we grow a team or do we help a team grow? And I agreed to both, that we do both. But think about what you were just talking about in terms of the Tuckman model, the forming, storming, et cetera. Suppose I have a well-established team that's just running like well-oiled gears. And now I introduce 2 or 3 new people into that team. So I'm back to, do I grow the team? In which case I am basically growing the team by adding to it, but I'm also having to grow that team in terms of its acceptance of the new people. And more importantly, help those new people fit in. Because there's nothing more awkward than walking into a well-oiled machine and saying, where do I fit? Right.
And yeah, and the model states that you have to start back off at forming all over again. You have even adding one person or removing one person, you have a new group, the end. And you have to consciously accept that. And then the facilitation of integrating that person and their dynamics into what you said, I agree with you, what you said, the synergistic behavior of the team. That is just the nature of human behavior.
And I would offer this, that anywhere along that forming, storming, norming, performing, anywhere along that axis, I can also, as a project manager or as a manager, help that team grow. So I've grown the team. Now I can help that team grow in whatever they need at that time. If they're storming, that's a different, different prescription for how to help them grow versus if they're performing, how can they even accelerate that performance? Right. So there's different aspects of that. But once I have my team in place, I think it's incumbent on me as their leader to make sure that they are continuing to grow in their careers and their ability to perform.
Yes. Yes. And getting back to thinking about the team as a unit and training as a unit and those working together for the health of the project. Um, you're building the skills and you're helping them with their knowledge and their attributes. And attributes partly are, my social skills, my interpersonal skills, and helping them with how they can overcome the various bottlenecks that they approach as they go through. This is what we were talking about earlier. It's not just getting the work done. It's not training is not just preparing them to be good producers of work. It's actually helping them, even though they've done it thousands of times, get back into the effort of quote unquote being a group.
And that is so important. And especially, and you've heard this and I've heard this. We IT people can be prima donnas, right? We can.
Oh
So if
no,
I've had,
not me. Not me.
so if I'm a 5-year technical architect, I don't want to go back to documenting something that's beneath, that was 5 years ago. I mean, but what we do is we help our team such that we all pull up our sleeves and it doesn't matter the task. What matters is the end result that we're all achieving. And if one of my junior staff is off sick, I will absolutely jump in, even as a lead, even as a manager, and pick up that person's workload and make sure it happens. So there's more to team even than even just the training. There's that whole aspect of how it is that we work together as a single unit to get the job done.
Yes, yes, and it starts from the very beginning. It's funny because currently the way we teach people formal project management isn't this is how the project gets approved. It's how do you facilitate the healthy growth and the healthy environment of a team? That's job number one. And I really, really wholeheartedly support that mindset. That's the most important thing you can do.
And if I read into what you just said, would you then support the fact that growth of a team is natural, or do you think it has to be kind of groomed along the way?
I take the farmer's approach. Like you, the answer is yes. And like you, I choose the best seeds I can find, and I choose the best livestock I can find and give them the perfect environment. And I make sure and I monitor the progress such that number one, nothing gets in their way. Number two, everything they have is in place. So it's a combination. It's a combination, selecting the best of breed plus facilitating their optimal performance as individuals and as groups.
Yeah. I used to work with my clients to say, when I want your subject matter experts, I don't want your cast offs. I want your brightest and your best. And it's interesting because that helps to build the team and it helps to build a strong, solid knowledge base to make that project go forward. But it's interesting that you mentioned the farmer approach or the farming approach, because I was just before this, I was out pruning my tomato plants. And here's why, because what I find is if you prune your tomatoes and as they grow, they yield much better. Now, last year, and here's where this comes from. You'll like this because the question I asked is growth natural. So last year I had a tomato plant in my garden that was a volunteer. I don't know how it got there, but it was there. And that tomato plant created this huge bush. Now I did get fruit off that tomato plant, but in growing naturally into this huge bush, it shaded out some of my other garden plants. It stopped their growth. And in terms of what I was able to yield, I did not get near the yield I should have had I been actually pruning it. So I think that's, to me, that hit home today as I was pruning my tomatoes, because yes, growth is natural, but undisciplined growth is probably not what we're looking for as we build our teams.
Exactly. Exactly. And as you were speaking, I was thinking of two things. Number one, my rose bushes, same thing.
Same thing.
As the flowers and blossoms start to wilt, get rid of them. We don't need them anymore. And actually, they're going to pull a lot of energy away from the bush. And if you do that properly and in a timely manner, you can get 2 or 3 yields of blooms from a rose bush, where maybe in a season you may get 1 and at the very best 2. And then you have to spend a lot of effort next spring cleaning out the rose bush.
And, and as I'm talking tomatoes and you're talking roses, I don't want any of our audience to get the idea that we as project managers start pruning our teams by getting rid of those people who are less productive. No, what we're doing in pruning, sometimes we're pruning bad habits. Sometimes we're pruning time management issues. Sometimes we're pruning conflicts, but we're pruning at all times.
Pruning and grooming. And
Yes.
we use those terms in Agile, but we do it from a behavioral standpoint constantly. I find myself doing this in my personal behavior and my personal action, both in my personal and my work life. Pruning and grooming, what's working, what's not.
Well, and that's huge. And yes, sometimes if someone refuses to work, maybe they have to be pruned completely from the team, but that's not our thought process as leaders. We want to salvage everyone and make them the most productive they can to benefit the end user and the end result. So I like this. Is growth natural? Yes, but undisciplined growth is probably not what we're looking for.
Exactly. Exactly. So let's throw another ingredient into the pot. We've talked about team building, and we have an idea of what we mean by team, and we've talked about the Kuckman model. We've talked about training and how that works. One other component that I was thinking about as I was preparing for this discussion, what about lessons learned? Lessons learned also seem to work really well with team building, and it brings in a sense of continuous improvement. What are your thoughts there?
No, I agree with you. Lessons learned are important, but here's the downfall of lessons learned is a lot of teams that I have witnessed from afar gather their lessons learned, document them in these beautiful Excel spreadsheets, put them on the shelf, and then go on as though it never happened. So those lessons learned are not really learned. They're documented. They're just not learned.
Yeah, they're organizational assets, and
Right.
those tend to get delegated or relegated to dust. I agree with you totally. A lesson learned is something that's exercised and measured and eventually replaced if you find something better.
So if I can go back to your question again, then in terms of lessons learned and innovation in that, if we as project managers, as IT leaders, whatever position we hold of leadership on any project, if we are not always thinking lessons learned, whether we're documenting them at that time as a formal part of our project, or whether we're just thinking through the last experience we had in terms of how we could improve that, if we're not doing that, we are not being good project managers. Because in every single situation, whether I have a lesson learned that says I can't do this again, I need to improve, or we've just done an incredible thing. Let's make this part of our ongoing process because it really worked well. Lessons learned are both positive and negative. If we're not doing that at all times as project managers, we shouldn't be managing projects.
There's a statement in the PMI training literature says we as leaders question authority. That is a dangerous statement.
It is.
Um,
Was it written by someone who came out of the 1960s?
Possibly, very possibly. I was reminded when I was preparing to teach under this new model, I was reminded of an intellectual model that came out of the English philosophical Renaissance with the Irish universities and the Scottish universities all growing very mature in the 16, 17, 1800s. There's something called Chesterton's fence. You can look this up, or you can ask. I can send some links out to those who are curious. It says if you're walking on the hillside and come across a fence and it seems to have no purpose, don't replace it unless you know the purpose for which it was placed. And this is the whole concept behind being a leader. We don't just improve, because that uncontrolled itself also can lead us to wild growth. What we need to do is understand why we're making this improvement and what the true value of that improvement is. It's a measurable, quantifiable, result where we say this is why.
That's interesting. By the way, just as an aside, I had the privilege a few years ago of touring. I think it was at Temple University in Dublin. Fantastic, unbelievable. But just having gone through that, I can see where that wisdom comes from. But
Well,
that was free. That was an aside.
Yeah, and this was the birth. This whole collection of knowledge was where we get the School of Economics and all of the great philosophers that contributed to, our founding fathers' wisdom. But they were actually thinking around the same thing you and I are, that as leaders and managers, we prune and we groom. And we both use the training and we use the team building. Because one of the things that I have learned over time is people don't do work. It's not, people contribute to the work. People contribute to the work, but it's the group, it's the team that actually gets the work done.
Have you been on a project where lessons learned were not applied? Perhaps selected but not applied?
Oh yeah. The culture. When culture created a standstill to innovation. That's, again, Tom Peters. Culture eats process for breakfast. When you hear somebody say, this is the way we've always done it, and we don't care why or why not it's done that way, it's going to be a huge roadblock. And you have to add 6 to 9 months to just breaking that mindset down before you make progress. And sometimes the project has been too short, and we've had to actually work around that. That was an extreme blocker. We're not just talking about obstacles here.
And that's those words. That's the way we've always done it. That should be the first question any team leader asks when they're starting to compile a list of lessons learned, because that's not just to projects, but to organizations.
Yeah.
There's no innovation. We're talking about innovation coming out of lessons learned. There's no innovation if that's the way we've always done it.
Yeah. And having a team accept that as status quo is condemning your project to very, very, very limited acquisition of new knowledge.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Let me kind of take this conversation to a little different area. A lot of times when we think of growing our teams and training, we think of the individual who needs something. I need someone here who needs to upgrade their Microsoft certification. I need someone here who needs training in the latest agile methodologies. So we tend to think individually. But have you ever experienced what have you thought about in terms of if I have to train my collective, my team itself, what kinds of training would I provide to the collective?
It's skills and then drills. Okay. Have you ever heard of T-based skills or
Oh yeah.
team workers?
Yeah, we
Okay.
talked about that a year ago, I think, on one of our podcasts. And I remember reading up on that because it was the first time I'd kind of come across that.
Yeah, it's a it has an illustrious history. It talks about team members as general specialists, and it says number one, I have to be really well skilled, and that's my training, and then I have to learn how to employ my skills with the skills of the rest of my team. It's my specialist plus my general application. And so when we're talking about training, we're talking about the vertical part of the team. And team building, we're talking about the horizontal part of the team. And they go well together. And yes, they have to work that way. It's establishing an understanding and mindset of this T-based attitude where everybody has their unique capabilities, but it's the combination of those capabilities. Let me give you a quick example. Let's go Neolithic, right? We have a group of 5 young kids. One is really fast, one has really great eyesight. 2 of them are really good with spears, and one of them is a good archer. Okay. So you're going to get a couple of them who are really good runners to actually learn how to chase game into a canyon. And then you're going to get the archer at the top who can actually take out the strong animals, while the others with their spears can take the slower ones. And if you work as a team like that, number one, everybody's going to go home with a lot of game. Number two, we're going to have a lot more fun when we go home with the stories we have.
That is a great analogy because, in answering my own question in terms of growing a team versus just individuals, one of the things that I really stress up front, and we do actually team building exercises on this, is how to work collaboratively. I don't want any Lone Ranger syndromes on my teams,
Oh,
right? So the analogy you just had was if I'm a one skilled hunter, I may be the spearman. I may go hungry for a long time before I can finally scare up enough game, slow one, if I accidentally stumble upon one and kill it, right? I mean, it's just, you end up with that situation. But if you have your team with all of their different skills, everyone goes home satisfied.
so let's put that in the Tuckman model. Okay. So Tuckman says we have to start off and we learn about each other, we form, and then we get comfortable enough with each other that we can air our grievances and we storm, right? We let our guards down and tell people what we really think. And then through working together, we can actually learn how our skills can be complementary. And that's where we start norming and we start behaving as a team or a group. And that's when we can actually start saying, can we actually refine this normal behavior? Normal behavior is the initial goal, but you want to actually go into the performing mode in the Tuckman model in order to improve and refine the capabilities once you get that normal behavior.
And I think that's what I was alluding to before. At every step along that axis, there is opportunity to get the entire group to learn new skills as a group. So I mentioned the collaboration part. That's probably there throughout. One of the things that I demand of my teams is mutual respect. I don't have to like you. I don't have to go to lunch with you. I don't have to send your kids birthday presents, but I have to respect you. And so, and that may be part of the group training during the storming part. So I can see how this all kind of fits together where we work together as a group to learn these behaviors so that the performing eventually becomes sort of a second nature part of our work.
So we can actually do a lot of the mechanics up front.
Yeah.
We can actually, you know, once we pull the team together for the first time, we can get a set of agreements on how we're going to play well together. And
Yeah.
you and I call that a team chart. We're going to have rough spots, we're going to have easy spots, and we're going to support each other. We're all different. And actually recognizing that differences create opportunity for growth for all of us, and get that in a document that we all commit to, right? And then we can actually use that as the stepping point off into starting the actual work of the project.
That's a great idea. I can't tell you how many times. Well, I guess I can, probably a couple of times where I've been offered up something like, hey, I have the greatest database analyst that you could ever need for your team. Could you take him, please, on your team? One little caveat, though, he doesn't get along with anybody. So the question is, do I take a chance on him or her? And using what you just talked about, then develop that upfront agreement and work with that person so that they do get along, at least in a mutual respectful fashion? Or do I just say, no, thanks, I'll pass. I'd rather have a less proficient database analyst who gets along with people than one who is incredible who doesn't.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Now, the problem is a lot of times, and in my world, in the world of a lot of project managers, you don't get a choice.
That's true.
And research analysts, because of the mindset, they tend to be individual contributors. And how I have an idea, and I've found this out through making some mistakes, but also having some successes, how to bring them into a team halfway. How would you approach that with somebody who you have a really well well-oiled machinery group who really gets together and loves to be together, and you're bringing in this introvert that's necessary, yet um, you see could be clashes. What would you look for, and how would you do that?
So I think there's several things I would look for. If I knew this about this person ahead of time, I might talk to my team before I bring that person in and let them know kind of this is what we're going to experience. This is kind of the individual that's coming. That's neither right nor wrong. It's just that person. We're all different. So let's figure out how we're going to work together and make that person's contribution as much as we require of that person. On the other hand, if I didn't know that, I would certainly, anytime I bring a new person in, I certainly watch the dynamics on a daily basis to make sure. I've seen conflicts as a result of a new person coming in where they didn't quite know their role, or even if they did, they didn't quite know where to fit in. And so then there end up being clashes because they overstep into another person's silo. And so, yeah, I think in that case, you end up just kind of serving, coaching, serving, mentoring, serving.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I had a guy who was a brilliant designer, network designer, but in in meetings when we were making decisions, he was always the naysayer. Always
Oh,
said, "No, no, there's another way you need to look at it." It's like, "Oh, come on, we need to move on. Everybody else agrees, right?" And I was pulling out my old disagree and commit tools and that kind of thing, until one day I realized that this person had discovered that they saw things in a totally different way. And The only thing I did was communicate this understanding of this person's perception and their role as basically, ensuring that we've discovered enough risk around this, or we can actually put some of these risks to rest, and having that communicated both with the individual. That's great. I love this. Now, can we build that into the way we have our meetings and also communicate, like you said, with the team and saying, this is the mindset. How can we take advantage of this?
Yes. Yeah. Because they're clearly seeing something we're not. They may not be presenting it well. But
And this is another example of how training and team building go hand in hand.
yeah, I was, as you were talking, I just remembered a situation where I brought a QA person onto my team. And it just so happened that over the years, I had developed a relationship, a friendship outside of, outside of work with this person. But my deputy was also a personal friend who we had friendship outside of work. What happened was I brought this new person on, and the QA person and my deputy hated each other. I did not understand this. And so that was a dynamic I had to work through. And finally, I just got to the point where if you guys need to work together on any part of the project, I need to be in the same meeting with you so that we can keep the oil and water at least separated to some degree.
This is something that will be consciously communicated. And I think groups, it's funny, individuals may, may take it as a snub, but the group mind thing actually approves of us stepping in and making sure the group works together well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So to move on here, we've been talking about helping people function well in groups. Um, what do you look for when helping a team or a group grow? What are the indicators? And besides just the behavior and their ability to get work done, what do you look for when you're looking for opportunities for growth? Let's make a list. Okay. First of all, like we said, the Tuckman model, the behavior of the individual dynamics and how the group comes together to work as a team. And number two, getting the work done. I think those are the big categories. What are the individual components that you observe as opportunities for growth within that?
I think I still go back to what we just finished talking about, and that was in terms of collaboration and mutual respect and that sort of thing. But I also look to mentorship as an aspect of who needs a mentor, who can be a mentor, that sort of thing. Um, the one that's tougher, which is becoming more of a norm in IT shops these days, is the whole idea of self-organizing teams. That one's tougher because people come from a whole different dynamic where they're used to having tasks assigned and they're used to doing great jobs within those assignments, but they're not used to sort of finding their own assignments within a team. But there's different aspects. I think every project offers its own opportunities and challenges to look for areas where individuals and where the team as a collective needs assistance in training or mentorship or whatever.
It
I'm not
takes
sure I've answered your question.
Actually, it does.
Yeah.
That actually opens up an area of exploration. Here's why. When I was first hired to a major silicon manufacturer, I was brought in as a part of a consulting group. And my manager sat me down on Monday in the afternoon. I'd gone through a whole day of training, right? And he said, "Okay, Tim, what do you want to get done by the end of the week?" I'm thinking, "You need to tell me." And he said, "No, you tell me what you need to get done to
Yeah.
be able to be productive." And it was like, wow, everything was spun on its head to where we thought managers managed work, but he was talking as a person who actually leads people. And then as we got together during the week, we started bringing the work in. So it was almost like, from that experience, and this has been what? This has been 21, 22 years ago. Um, that the focus was on preparing the people to work as individuals, as a group, even before the work is discussed.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So in all of this talk that we've had in team building training, lessons learned, mentorship, um, as you apply these to your own teams, what in the past or what's been the most engaging part of helping that team grow and learn?
Oh, easily Christmas. Easily. It's Christmas morning and opening up the little presents of discovering a new idea. People who work in projects and project management love learning and growing. It seems that that's our inspiration of choice. It's our reward. And there is a physiological reward from learning and growing. And first of all, that's why I got into this whole thing. It's the emotional and intellectual satisfaction, personal growth. But then seeing it happen through other people's experience magnified that for me. And this is one of the reasons why, number one, I became a project manager. It's like they've learned something, and I say, "Isn't that cool?" And second of all, it's what inspired me to become a teacher, to actually scale this out way beyond project after project, and be able to replicate, the experience of being able to manage and lead through as many managers and leaders as I touch. It's that emotional, intellectual satisfaction from growth and development.
And I think that's important. I call it watching the light bulbs go on. If you're working with someone, you're working with someone, and this has happened to me several times. And then someone will come and they'll come to my office and they'll say, "Hey, I'm going to do, this is what I just did. And this is the result. And it's fabulous." And I'm thinking, I've coached you in that area for the last year, but that's okay. I'm not going to say I told you so
Yeah.
because you came to that conclusion, whether I coached you or not. Now it's part of you, which helps our team progress. And I don't care who takes the credit. I saw your light bulb go on. I see the excitement in your voice, and that's better to me than extra dollars on my paycheck.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Think about being a swimming coach, right? When you first teach kids how to swim, they're in the water and they're flopping around like crazy. But one day they figure out if they move their hands in a certain rhythm, and if they move their legs and feet in a certain rhythm, and if they do that in a cyclic way, it propels them through the water like crazy. And boom, they're off and they're really happy. That's exactly what we're talking about here. And yeah, you work with them for a long time. And then you look back and smile, say, huh, I wonder why it works that way. Ha ha ha.
Yeah. Some of it's from the coaching, but some of it's just from their own
Yeah.
ability to apply coaching, whether it's subconsciously applying it or consciously applying it. So yeah,
And
that's
you know what? You cannot teach people most of this. This is the problem. Self-organizing and developing yourself and working as a fully functioning team, not just as a team naturally functions, but actually refining that.
yeah.
Um, it 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 takes extra effort. And this is where we actually can assist a lot to make it easier for them to get to a more satisfactory performance for them.
Yeah. So how does engagement come into play with team building?
That's what it's all about. To be engaged is to participate in the work, is to give your comments and ideas and give your votes. To give your ideas and votes is to place a piece of your part of who you are in the work. And it's basically, personal value that's attributed to the work. And if the work is part of my personal value, I won't just support it. I'll be proud of it.
Yeah.
And that's where engagement comes in. And so I see, working on individual as well as group engagement as a very powerful tool for motivation of the group. And that's contribution in conversations, whether it's social or professional. It's through recognition of the individual as well as recognition of the performance. And it's through all around personal awareness and understanding how humans naturally function as group. It's the give and take. It's the sharing of information two ways. It's the sharing of work in a collaborative manner that actually provides greater satisfaction than just being, a lone wolf.
Well, yeah. In fact, what I often say is the corollary to that, and that is no engagement, no team building. I've actually not very often, but I've actually witnessed what someone called a team, but was just a group of individuals all kind of doing their own thing. And that, people stepping over each other, it was just not a pretty sight. And of course, failure resulted as a result of that. But had the team lead or the IT project manager or whoever was in charge, I'll use that word in charge, had they brought them together for a common purpose and really mentored them and really engaged them and really thought through in terms of how group dynamics work, they could have easily assembled those people into a well-oiled machine, but they didn't. And
Yeah.
so again, it's not the fault of the people. It's in this situation that I witnessed, it's the fault of the project manager who truly should not have been in that position as a leader.
Yeah, and I've been part of organizations who had superstars, and those superstars were very important, and it broke the performance of the organization. Again, it there was an emotional undercurrent that said, "Oh, this organization is good because of that person. If we lose that person, the organization falls apart."
Oh, yeah.
Same thing as a project.
Yeah.
That superstars are great. You need superstars to actually get things going, but then you need a team and a group for consistent, ongoing results. And
Yeah.
this is where the transition of a lot of organizations and even corporations fail. They can't get out of that startup mode because they're not able to transition to, developing the culture and developing the unity that you need to actually have, reproducible results.
Well, in the minute that you start creating these silos of expertise where the whole project depends on a single person or the whole organization depends on these three people, you're always vulnerable in terms of them leaving for greener pastures, because if you're relying on them on that much, if you're relying on them that much, you're not giving them opportunity to elevate themselves. And the minute that you start relying on that, your entire organization is in danger of falling apart. So we can never get into that position. That's why the whole team concept, based on synergy and collaboration rather than lone wolves, is a much more important part of what it is that we're talking about in terms of training and mentorship and team building and all of that.
Yeah. And so this actually wraps up what we're talking about really well. There's incredible value on focusing on the team. And in fact, it's the team that produces the results. There's a necessary requirement for ongoing continuous training and lessons learned. And we've discussed that. And
Yeah,
all of this together actually promotes, progress, not just in getting the work done in the project, how we're getting the work done and the satisfaction from the work as well.
absolutely. So you had asked the question in our preparation time for this podcast. You asked the question, where do I start with team building if I want to engage? We're just talking about engagement. And I thought about that for a while and I thought, well, wait a minute. How do I engage if I want to foster team building? Maybe maybe there's two sides to that coin that make a lot more sense. I think as a lead, it's your responsibility to absolutely engage with every member of your team, either individually or as the collective, but it has to be that engagement. And you have to be that person who leads by example.
Right. It's the recognition part of engagement that
Yes.
actually gets people emotionally involved in the work, not just intellectually involved.
Yeah.
And with that in place, then you can actually get them to get into the swing of not just getting the work done, but learning how to work with others.
Yeah. And this has been a very scintillating conversation. All as all of our conversations are. So
That's
I
all.
can hardly wait till next week to hear what I'm going to say. Or to hear what you're going to say. So no, this has always been fun. So I appreciate your time, your effort.
As well yours, as well yours. I appreciate you setting aside the time too. So
Right.
so where can we find you this next week if we have questions?
LinkedIn. Just look up Merv Jersak at LinkedIn or People First Project Management on LinkedIn. So I'm checking my LinkedIn profile or not my engagement every single day. So yeah, I'm there. How about yourself?
Excellent. Mine as well. Thanks
Until
again. And thanks everyone for checking in. If you have more questions, please stay in touch with us, subscribe and see if you can participate in this conversation because it just makes it better.
absolutely. All right. Next week.
Sounds good. Thanks again.